Continuación con Edward Morse, Global Head Commodities Research in CitiGroup. Edward, hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
So, what is your overview of the commodities market right now?
The commodities market is still responding to all of the impact of the disruptions from Russia. Russia's the largest commodity exporting country in the world. It's the largest one when it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to copper and zinc and nickel. And all of these markets are being in dislocation of one sort or another and are seeing apparent shortages or adjustment to a fundamental change in flows. So the prices that we've seen going up should stay elevated for quite some time, depending on the commodity. We're beginning to see some differentiation among them, but we can just expect high prices on food and fuel for some time to come.
And we have seen significant price increases for several commodities, some metals as well, but mostly oil and gas. What can we expect in terms of prices?
Well, we think the prices are going to continue to diverge to some degree. We think the metals prices have not responded as fully as they're going to. That's because the metals have been responding to the lockdowns in China, where we've seen an accumulation of inventories, even of the metals that the world is dependent upon from Russia. So we think that while we've had a lull on the metal side, going forward, we expect even with a recession potentially happening in the world with the recovery in China, we expect to see significant onward inflation on metals, particularly copper, aluminum, nickel, cobalt, manganese, lithium, the things that go into battery power, where even with a slowdown on economic growth, there's an accentuation, particularly in the European Union, on a movement into the energy transition, which happens to be fairly metals intensive. On the other hand, we've already seen a fairly significant drop from the peaks on natural gas. Natural gas kind of led the commodity increases because the power sector was prone to high natural gas price increases a year ago. That came from other things in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But now we're seeing the natural gas markets readjusting to the lower flows from Russia, higher flows from outside of Europe, particularly flows coming from LNG from the United States into Europe, and European diversification away from gas into other sources of fuel for power generation, including a relaxation on thermal coal use and natural gas use. So we're going to see some things go up and some things go down. Natural gas has led the way on a relief from what was there in the past. We think oil will come next, probably later in the year. But the same kind of readjustment process has to take place that we've already seen taking place on the natural gas side.
Mm-hmm. And what about the impact? Could higher oil prices, for example, boycott the intention of a soft landing by the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank?
Well, there's a problem here in that the actions of the Federal Reserve Bank are really designed to deal with significantly other sources of inflation, including labor market inflation. It's not clear that when you have a disruption of a physical supply of commodities, that actions by banks are going to actually fully act to counter that inflation. We saw that actually in the period in the 1970s when we had a similar episode of commodity inflation with a significant impact of the price of commodities, the share of commodities in GDP. And yes, there were some recessionary activities and some central bank actions against them, but we had a significant increase in energy prices in particular in 1973-74. It was calm for a while, but we had two further geopolitical episodes, namely the Iranian Revolution at the end of the 1970s and then the Iran-Iraq War. So we had three stages of price increases for core energy, oil in particular, that was not that dramatically impacted by central bank activity. Now we know that we've had one set of geopolitical impacts. We don't know whether it'll be over, whether we'll have a readjustment to this, or whether we'll have some further geopolitical impacts with other disruptions to energy supply. But the lesson of the 1970s I think, is instructive, that you can't fully use monetary policy to counteract the impact of a disruption of a significant supply of food or fuel or other raw materials.
Edward Morse, thank you so much for being with us some minutes. Have a nice day.
Thanks for having me. Take care.